So I made a video almost 3 years ago about death denial, and it touched a bit on religion and atheism because it was in response to an atheist. And here again is where the lines between quote-unquote religion and atheism start to get a bit fuzzy. I'll link the video in the description if anyone wants to watch it. I have this really strange tone, and I sound like I'm about to put a bullet in my head. And I don't remember exactly why I sound like that. I was shocked to hear it after a while. I think I was doing the video during a bout of insomnia, so lack of sleep makes you sound like you're gonna end it. And I remember feeling the dread I described while making the video. So, okay, death anxiety. We're able to project our minds into the future, and as a consequence of this, we know we're going to die, even when we aren't in immediate danger. Like, for example, you are presumably watching this video somewhere where you're not about to get run over by a car, but you still might feel dread while thinking about having to die one day. And by death here, I mean the end of oneself and the end of your existence. Not, like death means you go on to the afterlife, because if you go on to the afterlife, then you didn't really die. So by death here, I mean the wall, the stop, end of the line. So since you die, it means that all the choices you made didn't matter. That if you lived the life you wanted, or if you suffered throughout, in the end, none of it mattered. Knowing that after it all ends, we were as insignificant as a rock. So this causes us to feel anxiety. So a way that people deal with this anxiety is to deny that we are going to die. In the video that I made, I argued that unless you're suicidal, actually even if you're suicidal in some cases, but unless you're suicidal, then you engage in some form of death denial. The most obvious way in which people deny that they're going to die is saying that they aren't really going to die, and that they're going to an afterlife where they'll live forever, the reincarnation, the immortal soul, etc. Death denial, I'd argue, seems to be a fundamental feature of religion. I could be wrong. I obviously don't know all religions. So religion is explicit death denial, but there are other more subtle and abstract forms of death denial. So the more abstract forms of death denial involve symbolic immortality, saying that, the flame dies but the light will last forever. Being remembered, being a conqueror that will live on, or an artist whose works of art will last forever. Another way is people denying that they are individuals and that they're part of a whole that lives on forever. They're a cell in an organism, a single cell that dies, but the organism keeps on living. So, for example, nationalism. You're a part of a nation. You die, but the nation will live on forever, and you were a part of it, and so you were immortal too. Your family will live on and carry on your memory with them. But here is how I've found some ways in which atheists, more specifically, deny death. So one of the ways that they deny death is by denying that death is even a problem. This is how theramintrees denied death in his video. I mean, how is death bad? You can't feel anything. You weren't afraid of the time before you were born. Of course, they still avoid death like the plague that leads to death. So this argument is a hedonist argument that says that since you can't experience pain when you're dead, or anything, then it can't be bad. I would argue that death is the source of suffering, that death is the source of bad. After all, what failures can't be erased given enough time? What projects can't you complete? What is the pain of hunger or cancer if you were to know that you don't die? I'd rather go to hell for all eternity, because I know there's no such thing as suffering without death. And if erasing a person isn't bad for a person, then what is? I mean, once you murder someone, hey, it's all fine and dandy. The person you wronged doesn't exist, and all the pain that they might have suffered, well, that was erased by the murder, so you're free to go. And if you still don't believe me, if you think you're not afraid of death because it's nothing to you, then I invite you to demonstrate it by putting a bullet in your head. Make sure it's a live stream, otherwise you can't upload the video after you're dead. But onto my favorite form of death denial by atheists. It's my favorite because it's so reactionary. It's a reaction to religion in general and to Christianity specifically, and the argument that death that death gives life meaning. That death makes life more beautiful because it gives it an urgency and it intensifies things. If you agree with this, that death gives life meaning, then congratulations, you agree with Ayn Rand and Thunderfoot. I'm not arguing that you're wrong because you agree with them. I'm pointing and laughing that you agree with them. And a variation of this argument is that immortality would be terrible because then everything is meaningless because there's so much of it. And this argument is so, I mean, it's probably economically untrue. They're inflating the price of things by limiting the supply. So they're inflating the worth of life by limiting it. And like, for example, water isn't going to be any less necessary because there's more of it. People in the desert where water is valuable, they have to drink water. But yeah, not me. I don't have to drink water because I live in a place with running water in a city on the edge of a giant fucking freshwater lake. So water, it's useless to me. If any of you saw the movie Troy, and you know that scene, the one that people like to quote it and I'll murder you. Hey, I'm doing you a favor now. You'll appreciate bad movies like Troy more, knowing that you'll never see any ever again. So if you've never seen the movie, I'll spare you the horror and the ugliness of this scene. He explains how it's actually the gods that envy mortals, because mortals are dying. I know, right? So he said, the gods envy us because you will never be as beautiful as you are now, all diseased and dying and rotting. Death makes everything awesome. And I'm not saying there isn't any beauty in life. If anybody wants to like strawman this, I'm saying there is beauty only in life, not in death. And here's something that I think Brad Pitt's gods would respond with. A story told by national park rangers. A man came up to a national park gate and said to the park ranger, "I've only got an hour to see Yosemite. If you only had an hour to see Yosemite, what would you do?" The ranger said, "Well, I'd go right over there and I'd sit on that rock and I'd cry." So my next favorite way that they deny death is atheists that deny death with science. I plan to do another video about this eventually, but there's these people who believe in transhumanism, that technology will bring us immortality. Ray Kurzweil is one of them. He eats like a bowl of pills a day, and he says that when he gets sad about that he remembers that he's not going to die. And when I tell them that this is a religion, they say, "No, it isn't. It's true." Well, if you found the one true religion or a path to the afterlife, that doesn't take away from the fact that it's a religion. And also, how awesome is it gonna be being rich and white in the future? I mean, where you can now literally buy your way into heaven. Can you imagine an afterlife where the only ones left are Republican vampires that are willing to sacrifice poor people?
So people with conflicting death-denying ideologies, when reminded of death, become tribalistic, for lack of a better word. Theramintrees mentioned some of the studies done on this in his video. A group of Christians, when reminded of death, would have a better opinion of other Christians and a more negative opinion of other religious groups, as opposed to Christians who were not reminded of death at all, who showed no preference. And this makes sense in a way, right? If you feel threatened and you or are reminded that you are dying, people that add onto this by suggesting that you are in fact going to die, you're not going to like them. And if you feel anxious about dying and you're taking comfort in the fact that you're actually going to live forever because Jesus gave you eternal life, an atheist saying "Nuh-uh," it almost becomes like a threat, right? So I was trying to figure out how I deny death, since I argue that everyone does it, I must do it too. So I think, okay, contemplate that one day you're gonna die and stop existing. Okay, now who pisses you off? And you know what? For me, it's not the religious. In fact, how the average atheist talks about death makes me more angry. And why can't they just say, yeah, I'm sad we're gonna die. It's okay to be sad. Let's be sad. No. When death comes up, religious people start saying these beautifully poetic things, right? About human dignity and worth, and how you're spared having to die, and spared the ugliness and the horror, and the last shall be first. But the atheists are like, nah, you just die and you rot. And if you don't accept that, it's because you're a little bitch who's afraid of death. Like, shut the fuck up, you fucking nihilist, rotting meatbags, fucking death lovers, necrophiliacs. These are the same people that call Islam a death cult. Like, I like how these fuckers pride themselves on how much like bullshit they can eat and how many times they can lash themselves in the back and saying stupid shit like religion is for the weak. The atheists that say that they aren't concerned with death are more deeply fucking deluded than the religious, who at least acknowledge there's a problem. Quick story, funny story about something that happened to me while scripting this video. I had a lucid dream, a dream in which you know you're dreaming, and I woke up, except I didn't really. I thought I woke up in this bed in this room, and there was this hand, there was this arm without a body, and it was pulling me and grabbing me, and then I couldn't scream, but then I heard like these really exaggerated like screams and wails, like somebody depicting hell in a bad movie, and then I thought, oh my god, this is hell. But then I thought, that means I'm still alive, and the fear washed away. So you see, there's no suffering in hell. Here's a quote that I was going to include, but I didn't want to go over my limit, so I cut out chunks of the video. If a human being did not have an eternal consciousness, if underlying everything there were only a wild fermenting power that writhing in dark passions produced everything, be it significant or insignificant, if a vast, never appeased emptiness is beneath everything, what then would life be but despair? If such were the situation, if there were no sacred bond that knit humankind together, if one generation emerged after another like forest foliage, if one generation replaced another like the song of birds in the forest, if the human race passed through the world as a ship through the sea, as wind through the desert, an unthinking and unproductive performance, if an eternal oblivion perpetually hungry lurked for its prey, and there were no power strong enough to wrench that away from it, how empty and devoid of consolation life would be. I should have read the warning at the beginning of the video. Insomnia's back. I haven't slept in 2 nights. I don't want to die.